But when they come on I've been out at the bar, somebody puts on Nickelback on the jukebox and people sing along. It's like
I know.
Again, that's more of a.
This is how you remind me. This is how
that's Nickelback, yeah.
Remind me. No on that one, but that's okay. I'm gonna give you that.
All right, and here we go. We are rolling. It is time for another episode of Cash's Top 5, and this one has been in the making for such a long time. We've been talking about wanting to do an episode, and I think we have landed on a great topic. Joining me today, the lovely, the unmatched, the wonderful Laura Steele. How are you, Laura?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you, Adam, for having me on today. I appreciate it. This is a very fiery topic we're going to get into for me, something that I've always I really never had trouble talking about, but always get really pissed off when I do.
It is a topic of controversy. People have some pretty big opinions about who should be in and who shouldn't be in, and that is kind of a tease. What are we ranking today? What's our topic?
We are ranking bands who should be, but are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum, often called Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum snubs.
Yes. And because we could also do a top 5 of who shouldn't be in. And I feel like we're going to touch on that a little bit, but we're going to be a little more positive. Instead of tearing other people down that have earned something, we're going to say, hey, why the heck aren't these guys in the Hall of Fame?
Ready to go?
I think we're ready to roll. We've got our top 5. I've pulled up the list for the people who are nominated for this year.
2022 just announced.
2022 just announced. So just real quick, just to touch on where we're at with the Hall of Fame before we jump in. We have Pat Benatar, we have Kate Bush, we have Devo of Whip It fame. We have Beck, we have Eminem, Judas Priest, the Eurythmics, and Dolly Parton. So that's where we're at with the nominees. We'll see who is actually going to get inducted. But we are talking about people that we think we should be in, should have probably been in a long time ago, but they definitely need to be in now. So let's kick it off. Laura Steele, who do you got at number 5?
Okay, at number 5, you just mentioned her. And the reason why I put this woman in at number 5 is because she was a nominee, not last year, but the year before. And I will tell you who she is in a second. Fans are able to vote, okay? So the fan can do the fan voting. And she actually was in the lead for fan voting for would have been 2019, right? 2019 and maybe 2020. Anyway, the fans were voting for one Pat Benatar. Pat Benatar won the fan voting for a good, several weeks. And then Dave Matthews snuck in front of her and got into the position of the fan voting. And Dave Matthews, here's how crazy the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is. I don't know what they're drinking. I don't know what they're smoking. Dave Matthews won the fan vote in the end. Guess what? Dave Matthews didn't get inducted, nor did Pat Benatar that year. So there you have it. That's stupid in itself. But Pat Benatar, let's talk about rock and roll. And let's talk about Pat Benatar. Pat Benatar was a one-time bank teller. She actually was kind of raised on opera singing, and I kind of thought that was the direction she was going to go in. And I think while she was working at the window at the bank, she was also singing and maybe moonlighting in bars where she was. And she actually just hit it big in the 80s. And a lot of girls in the 80s, when Pat Benatar was doing Love is a Battlefield and Hit Me With Your Best Shot, a lot of the girls were dressing like Pat Benatar, were watching those MTV videos. She was definitely an influence in the world of rock music. How do you make Pat Benatar a nominee for a rock hall position? Let the fans vote. They made their voices heard. They put her in the lead for quite some time. And then you don't induct her? And then they didn't even put her as a nominee in the past year. So now she's back as a nominee. So my number 5, who is deserving of a spot, who I believe is probably one of the biggest rock voices, female voices of the 80s, who deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, is Pat Benatar. That's my number 5.
That is a great pick. She didn't make my top 5, but she is definitely an honorable mention. Now, she is one where, we kind of talked about putting our top 5s together. Part of our picks were, I understand they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but they are not a personal favorite of mine. And then
Sure.
I have some picks that are just personal favorites. Like maybe like my number 1 probably on paper doesn't make sense, but it's my personal choice. But Pat Benatar, while not my favorite, and I think I say that because I've heard her music too much. Like I'm burned out because I've heard her, because you can't turn on classic rock radio or classic hits radio for 20 minutes and not hear on across the nation and not hear her songs. Like it has cut through. They stand the test of time. Joan Jett was nominated or inducted back in, like, I want to say 2015. So I don't know if like there's just a time gap that the committee needs to wait before they induct another chick rocker, but that shouldn't matter, especially
That shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't. And if we are going to talk about representation, how is she not in already? Like it's ridiculous. It shouldn't be it should be the fan voting. It should be the committee saying no, she should be in because she rocks and her songs are timeless. They are still just as active and just as, in the zeitgeist of rock radio today as they were 30, 40 years ago.
Who's your number 5?
My number 5 is, I will say, a personal pick. I know these are all personal, but this one I can see why people would be maybe a little more against it, or maybe not as deserving, but I have a personal connection with this band. My number 5, unfortunately in the grunge genre, so it gets snubbed quite a bit, but Alice in Chains is my number 5. I mean, you talk about quality versus quantity. Obviously, Lane Staley died in 2002, so they were only around for a little while. They only had a few albums out. Jar of Flies, Facelift, Dirt. The amount of incredible music they put out in the short period of time while they were working together was unbelievable. And you talk about rock radio, turn on a rock station and don't hear Man in the Box or Rooster. You're going to hear them. Those were the big hits, but they've got so many great songs.
So many.
Jerry Cantrell, one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Lane Staley and that voice, like I was torn here. I'm going to do a little spoiler alert. I had Soundgarden at number 5. I didn't put them in my top 5, but Chris Cornell, you can also make the case that voice, as soon as you hear one note, you're like, that's him.
Yeah.
But Alice in Chains just always cuts. There's a song when I'm really happy. There's a song when I'm really sad. I go in cycles. And for the grunge era, the 90s, to be snubbed the way they are, Nirvana got in 2014. Green Day got in at 4 or 5 years ago. That 90s rock should be more represented than what they have right now.
Keyword, rock.
Yeah.
Just rock. I mean, I think that an Alice in Chains and a Nirvana in already, obviously, those are grunge rock bands. You're calling it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. Those bands, we'll call it, the Music Hall of Fame and Museum if you want, but don't call it the rock and leave out those grunge bands, those bands that have been around for decades, like an Alice in Chains, but yet induct those who are way off the rock, off the rock tower, if you will.
That's a
good pick.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, it's not like we want to be exclusionary to great artists. I mentioned the 2022 nominees. You've got Dolly Parton, you've got Eminem, you've got Devo, you've got Beck. Beck is folk singer-songwriter and pop. You've got Eminem, who is hip hop and rap. You've got Dolly Parton, who is country. Pillars in their genre, but is that what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame should be about? Should it be about representation of all these different genres, or should it be about rock because it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? But anyway, that is a big part of our discussion. So my number 5 for you is Alice in Chains. You had Pat Benatar at number 5. Who's your number 4? Number
4. I'm going to go with a band that I loved listening to growing up, and I would say that this band so rocks, and there's so much heart behind this band and how they came to be, and that band simply goes after the name of the city that they started their career in, and that would be Boston. I love Boston. More Than a Feeling, rock and roll band, Hitch a Ride. Oh, there's so many songs. Peace of Mind. The thing about Boston is that they were actually very, Tom Scholz, who is a founding member of Boston, was a very bright guy. He went to MIT. He worked at the Polaroid company. He started making music. He was fascinated with making music in his basement. And so he had a recording studio, and he would make a lot of the music that we heard on some of their albums. In fact, there's a story about, I want to say it was Capitol Records. They were saying, no, you're going to come to LA and you're going to make your music here. And Tom Scholz would say, I'm making it in my basement. And I think he even kind of snuck some recordings, making some of the recordings in the basement. Boston, if you go and you look at the numbers and their hits and how many albums sold and how really they influenced a lot of other bands, especially on the technical side of things, the way they produced, they were just a fantastic, crisp, clean, clear, rockin' band. You cannot listen to a Boston album from start to finish and walk away from it and go, yeah, that didn't rock. That didn't rock. And they're just really an important band in the 70s, plus the album covers, which we're not talking about art, we're talking about music. But I actually just tweeted out earlier today, because I'm on the air in Cincinnati, and I played More Than a Feeling, and that album cover with the spaceship, but yet
It's iconic.
Or it's both. Boston, I just feel like, has been really severely overlooked in the world of respect from the temple, if you will, of rock and roll, which is supposed to be the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum.
I couldn't agree more. I was wondering if we were going to have much crossover from our lists. Boston is an honorable mention of mine. It probably should have made my top 5, but that would have been more of a personal choice versus what I've got listed on my top 5. I also have a couple of individuals that I thought were glaring omissions. So they kind of took the spot of some bands. But if you were to make a movie today or tomorrow, and you're going to make a movie, you're going to base it in the 70s, like a la Dazed and Confused, something that's a period piece, like set at that time, flare jeans and peace and love, the 60s and the 70s.
Pot, marijuana.
Smoking a little reefer after school,
Making out the back of a car.
How do you not include Boston on that soundtrack? They're More Than a Feeling would be number 1 on creating a playlist for the soundtrack of that movie. So to leave them out of the Hall of Fame this long is absolutely ridiculous. And it goes back to my Pat Benatar argument. You listen to rock radio across the world, but especially in the US, go 20 minutes without hearing More Than a Feeling or Foreplay Long Time
or
Peace of Mind, or I mean, and now I don't like Amanda, but that's enough. That was their ballad, 86.
Biggest hit, one of their biggest hits.
I know.
Massive hit for them.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just Amanda's who were buying it, but that was a huge hit for them. But yeah, I'm not big on power ballads. But anyway, respect to that song because it wasn't a huge one for them. Definitely. I love Boston. I just think that they really made serious advancements in. They're not really a prog rock band, but the way Tom Scholz mixed the sound of Listen to Foreplay Long Time, and it is just like, you're like, whoa, even More Than a Feeling. I mean, it's just like, wow, Peace of Mind, Hitch a Ride, rock and roll band. How do you not put a rock and roll band in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum that has a song called Rock and Roll Band?
Especially when you think about some of the bands that have made it already that could probably be labeled one-hit wonders, or right. Maybe they don't have the staying power.
Sure.
I just don't understand how they get snubbed. That's a really good pick. My number 4 for you is one that you mentioned already. And this is less of a personal pick, more of I'm really surprised they haven't been inducted just based on success and global reach. But I've got Dave Matthews Band at my number 4. They get the eye roll quite a bit from certain groups in the music world, and I understand that. They're a little more mainstream. They're kind of college rock. You're hitting the hacky sack, you're throwing frisbee. There might be some dubage at the concert.
And a jam band. I consider them kind of a jam band.
They are. And, if you want to talk about, again, representation, they are ska and they're funk and they're pop and they're rock and they're, bluesy. And they just hit all these different elements. There's a saxophone solo, then there's a drum solo, and then there's the guitar solo. They put on an incredible show. So not only their live show, but the albums that they've done, the global reach, they are just so massively successful. If you're going to put Bon Jovi in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I am not a huge fan of them, but they're in based on their success, Living on a Prayer, that's in every stadium in America. I get it. How does Dave Matthews Band not get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Are they not on that nominee list for this year?
I don't believe they are. No.
After winning the fan vote. And Pat Benatar right there in second place after she was in the lead for the fan vote. And then they chose neither of them based on the fan. What's the fan voting for? Don't get me started on that.
This is the committee that thought it was a good idea to induct The Cure and Beastie Boys and ABBA. And these are bands that, you can make your argument if you want, but these are, I don't know if they're hipsters or they just want to be cool or they think there's something influential. Take that out of it. If you're going to put that crap in, you better put in the good stuff. And whether you like it or not, college rock be damned, Dave Matthews Band should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not just by fan vote.
All right. So now we're at my number 3. I'm wearing their shirt. Want to see it? They will never make it in. And it sucks, but they'll never make it in. But this was a band that really helped shape my love for music. Growing up, I was a huge fan. I had every single album. A lot of their songs were about rock and roll and doing it. And it's Bad Company.
Bad Company, yes.
And I will say, if anybody asks me who has the best voice, well, and one of my other picks is coming up with one of my favorite lead vocalists, but one of my favorite lead vocalists of all rock and roll lead vocalists is Paul Rodgers. You just don't get better than Paul Rodgers. And the last time I saw them and he was out solo, they kind of went their separate ways, got back together. Paul Rodgers, that voice, Feel Like Making Love, Ready for Love. What else is their love song? They've got another one. Well, they've got several songs about. I think that Bad Company is one of the best sounding bands, and really a band that shaped kind of rock and roll in the 70s. But Paul Rodgers will tell you that Feel Like Making Love, which was a massive hit for obvious reasons, Feel Like Making Love was something that he came up with in the late 60s during that time of free love. And he loved music, and obviously he knew that that was his career and which way he wanted to go with his life was making music. And I think that Feel Like Making Love kind of light bulb went off, and he had a massive hit with it. Rock and Roll Fantasy. I mean, they have so many great songs, and I'm a huge Paul Rodgers fan. I say Bad Company just because I personally fell in love with music and rock and roll because of bands like Led Zeppelin, and because of bands like Bad Company, and because of bands like Boston. Bad Company is completely and utterly overlooked in the world of respect in rock and roll. I want to say that Paul Rodgers is in maybe the Songwriters Hall of Fame. I may be wrong on that. He should be, because he's written some humdingers. Bad Company, just go listen to Desolation Angels. Go listen to a Bad Company album and walk away from it. And if you don't think that it isn't worthy of rock hall material, then to check your brain.
That's a really good point that you make, because we've kind of talked about, radio hits. That's obviously both of our background being in radio as long as we have, but also that's what hits the mainstream. But when you take a look at deep cuts, you mentioned like listening to a full album, that idea to a younger generation or a different crowd, that doesn't exist anymore. It's a random song, a part of a playlist streaming on their phone, as
Oh,
opposed
the
to
album. Sorry.
putting the album on, laying down on the bed with the headphones on, and just taking the music in is so rare now. Like I don't even think people have the attention span to be able to do that. To your point, last year Cheap Trick got in. You're going to put Cheap Trick in, but not Bad Company. What the hell is wrong with you?
No, that's why I feel like, and this is, one of my biggest arguments is that there's so many that have come before that were of the era of rock. I mean, true, you call it classic rock now, but true, just like turn on the radio in the 70s and you want to rock out, you're going to hear Badco. You're going to hear Boston. You're going to hear a couple of the other bands that I'm going to list here in just a little bit. But Paul Rodgers and the guys from Bad Company, Simon Kirke, who's the drummer for the band, who's just brilliant. I mean, they're both just brilliant musicians and just a great sounding band. I just really invite everybody to listen to a Bad Company album and take away just that rock vibe, because they are definitely worthy of a spot in the Rock Hall. It ain't gonna happen, which sucks. Go ahead and put. I don't want to slam anybody who's in there, because a lot of the artists who are in there are deserving of accolades and are deserving of respect. But when you're talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum, and you're talking to a girl right now, I've been on the radio for 30 years. I played rock music for 30 years. My love for music was shaped by listening to these bands. That's worth a shot in the Rock Hall in itself, because, you not just because of Laura Steele and I play the music that I play on the radio, but just because of what we've listened to over the years and the decades and the impact that it's made. I can guarantee you, I made out to Bad Company. It was left over. It's a little too young for me to have made out from it in the 70s, but I was probably thinking of it in my mind, kind of like Paul Rodgers was thinking about it in the 60s before it became a hit in the 70s. But it was shaping up in my mind, and I'm sure I played it for a boy somewhere along the line, and he's like, "Oh, she's playing this song. That must mean something."
She's a cool girl. Yeah.
Right. So Bad Company.
My number 3 for you is we're getting into the artist territory. Okay. I definitely have some bands that I feel are deserving, but there's a couple of individuals that I'm flabbergasted. I will use that word, that they're not in the Hall of Fame. My number 3 also kind of represents a genre that I feel has been pretty overlooked when it comes to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Ozzy Osbourne as a single artist. It took forever for Black Sabbath to get in as a band, which is just, I don't understand how, when they are as incredible as they are. But if you're also talking about influence, you're going to put in like the Sex Pistols or the Clash into the Hall of Fame because of their influence, but you're going to leave Ozzy out and make Black Sabbath wait forever. You're so dumb. But you take Sabbath out of it and you still have Ozzy Osbourne. You've got Crazy Train. You've got No More Tears. You've got Hellraiser. You got Mr. Tinker.
Mama, I'm coming home.
Mama, I'm coming home. I mean, you've got just an incredible catalog of songs. But the iconography of Ozzy, the Alamo, the Bat, the Prince of Darkness, the going crazy on stage, and the show, kind of in the later years, he remained relevant to a whole new generation. I can't believe that Ozzy is not in. I've talked about, metal now being overlooked. Judas Priest is now nominated again this year. We'll see if they get in. I doubt it. Iron Maiden, Thin Lizzy, we're going to go back a little further. But you talk about the influence that Thin Lizzy and Motorhead, like the fact that they had on Metallica and those bands that are now in the Hall of Fame. I don't understand it. I don't know what the guys got to do, but if we're talking individually,
fight the head off another bat.
Yeah, I mean, maybe those, I think it was Nikki Sixx, or it was either Nikki Sixx or Tommy Lee. One of the two from Motley Crue said it was their the off stage antics that has kept them out of the Hall of Fame. I don't know that I buy that at all. I've heard some crazy Zeppelin stories. I've heard some crazy other stories. Bands have pretty dark histories, especially when there was no social media back in '74. But that can't be the only reason they're overlooking the genre. I mean, there's just so much great metal out there, and Ozzy, I think, stands alone as being an individual that should be in the Hall of Fame.
Well, we just got Stevie Nicks inducted, and Fleetwood Mac was inducted, so you've got that. So Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks is in twice.
Which
so
I don't understand. Like, I love Stevie Nicks and I love Fleetwood Mac, but I don't think she, as an individual artist, stands on her own. Like,
she does. I disagree.
Okay,
but for different reasons. Musically, yes, there's so many great songs. Stevie Nicks has so many great solo songs. Belladonna, great album. She teamed up, of course, with Tom Petty. She's been I think she deserves it. But like I said, on that same page, then why doesn't Ozzy deserve it if Black Sabbath is in?
And that's more of where I'm coming from. I don't mean to tear Stevie down so much as I mean to be like, hey, if we're going to be like, if we're going to talk individual artists, Jeff Beck is in the Hall of Fame. You've got Donovan in the Hall of Fame, Cat Stevens.
Yeah.
What?
Ozzy not be in on a, yeah, I got anyway. You. I feel you on that one.
All right, I'm getting a little heated. I'm going to try to calm it down. This was one I knew was going to be, we were going to get into it, and we're approaching our top two that I definitely feel strongly about. So we've got Pat Benatar, we've got Boston, we've got Bad Company. You've got a really good quarter hour you're putting together with your classic rock here.
I might be playing this on WJJK tonight or in the box during the day tomorrow. Number two for me.
Number two.
You ready? This is a band that's is a hybrid band, if you will. They are a American/British band, and hence the name of the band. Meaning that the reason why they named themselves what they did is because some of the guys were from the US, some are from England. The band I'm speaking of is Foreigner. Foreigner. Oh my goodness. Look, people can, there's so, oh God, and I could just throw in, there's so many other bands of that ilk that I want to just say, you got Foreigner, but I only have one in the two spots, so I'll just be quiet on the other ones. But they're bands like Foreigner. I picked Foreigner out of kind of a clump of bands that really influenced me in the 70s. I was a huge Foreigner fan. Well, any of these bands that I mentioned, I'm a huge fan of, obviously, and feel that they're deserving of a spot in the Rock Hall. But Foreigner, we just have a lot of just great songs that just, shaped love of music for many people, and probably bands that came after them were influenced by them. I'm just going to throw out some of the songs. Okay, I really haven't done this with any of the bands, like one great song after another, but I'm going to talk about like the machine that is a band and the hits that come out from a band. Okay, and why this band should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I'm just going to go off the songs. Jukebox Hero, Cold as Ice. And I don't get mad at me, but I know it's sappy. I Want to Know What Love Is. And it was the first song I ever played on the radio in my radio career. It was Foreigner, I Want to Know What Love Is.
Oh, you'll never forget. That's special.
It had the New Jersey Mass Choir. If you go and you watch the video, I encourage everybody to go watch the video. Of that song, I Want to Know What Love Is, because they got the New Jersey Mass Choir doing background vocals. Lou Gramm, what a great voice Lou Gramm had. Such a great voice. Mick Jones. Listen, Lou Gramm and Mick Jones, you got McCartney and Lennon, great songwriting combo. Lou Gramm and Mick Jones wrote some damn good songs, y'all. Like some of the best. What am I forgetting? Urgent. So we've got Jukebox Hero, we got Urgent, we got Cold as Ice.
Feels Like the First Time.
Which was their first hit, by the way, ironically. Feels Like the First Time, put them on the map, made them really a band that made it big. But if you go and you listen to those albums as well, I'm talking about songs, but then if you still drop the needle on the record, or some of people watching do that now, I know that's coming back in. Man, there's a great song from Bad Company that nobody probably knows. It's called I'm a Fool for You Anyway. It's basically a breakup song, and the guy just gets his heart broken. He's just like, but I'm a fool for you anyway. Oh my gosh. It's my favorite, one of my favorite ballads. And I'm not a huge ballad girl, but Foreigner has worked their tail off. And I know Lou Gramm is not in the band anymore. There was talk of it. Listen, this is a band that's also carried on with the lead singer Oh dear, I've interviewed him a couple times too. Anyway, the fellow that's kind of filled in a la kind of like we had with uh Journey. You know, we lost Steve Perry, but yet there's a guy that's filling in Steve Perry's position, and Journey's one of the biggest touring bands. Foreigner has managed to, with Nick Jones, still get out there, do it, and rock it. One of my favorite Carb days was Foreigner, and Kool and the Gang opened up, and that was really cool at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy. I really enjoy seeing them live, even though I think Lou Graham is just has a brilliant voice, but he had some health issues, and it just his time to step away happened. And Nick Jones said, "We're going to keep it going," and they have. It's just like a football team that has to switch quarterbacks. We know what that's like in Indianapolis.
Sadly,
But
we do.
you know, there's some really good talent in that band and really good songs to back it up. Foreigner, I'm going to go ahead and say I probably should have put them up higher if we're going. I didn't really think it through like from top 5 down. So Foreigner, maybe I might want to have I'm not switching it around now, but I just feel that Foreigner is so well deserving of the spot. Do you like Foreigner?
Well, you got him at number 2, so I mean, that's a lot of respect.
I love
Yeah.
and I loved them.
Foreigner is one of those bands that I absolutely love. Blue Morning is one of my all-time favorite songs. Long, Long Way from Home.
You know it. You know it.
I mean, it's one of those, you think that they just have Jukebox Hero because that's when you hear most popular, but when you look at their singles and you look at their hits over the years, you're like, oh man, that's another really great one.
Right?
And I think there's something to be said. I remember this a lot in working in country radio, as long as I did. When you listen to a newer act, or you try to, what's going to be a hit, what artist is going to hit, it's kind of difficult to tell like who's going to pop. You just never know. But one thing I did pick up on is if you have a distinct sound, like when you hear Carrie Underwood belt out, like, it's Carrie as soon as you hear it. Garth Brooks as soon as you hear Garth. As soon as you hear some of these bands, the first time you hear Kevin Cronin from REO, when you hear
the clump, he's the one I wanted to clump in there. Sticks, REO, Foreigner. Can I make 3? Can I put 3 bands in my number 2 spot? Sticks, Foreigner, and REO, please.
Sure,
No.
they're the ones that they tour together every summer. They just change
Fine.
They'll throw in a White Snake every once in a while, but yeah.
You know what I mean? Though to me, that's, you know what? Go ahead and just make a classic rock hall of fame, you guys, over in Cleveland.
There probably is a classic rock hall of fame, like because there's a hip hop hall of fame in New York.
Well, fine, then stop putting people in the rock hall and put them in the hip hop hall of fame,
or the pop hall of fame, or the country hall of fame. Well, they do have the country hall of fame. Yeah,
that would be Whitney Houston. Although I have mad respect, I get that. I get it. But if you're going to call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, let's get this list, my list here, your list, rock bands that are true, like rock bands.
Before Dolly Parton.
God, I love Dolly.
And I love Dolly, but
it's real hard to diss Dolly. It's real hard.
It is, but it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as much as, because Dolly Parton is now the new Betty White. Now that Betty White has sadly passed, I think she's the next, just universally beloved, and rightfully so. I don't think it's not deserved. But anyway, we're getting a little off the rails here. I think that's a great pick. Your number 2 is Foreigner, Sticks, REO Speedwagon.
Yeah, that's it. Can you let me squeeze 3 into 1? I just love Foreigner. Foreigner probably made more. My sister loves Sticks. So my sister was a big Sticks fan. Not that I didn't love Sticks. And I just think they're a great band. And I just saw them at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Doug Bowles was kind enough to invite me to a private party over the summer where Sticks performed. And it was so fun.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was private. It was for a business. And he called me and he says, Beth and I are just talking about who would really appreciate being here tonight. I said, I am in my car. And so I went and I rocked out to Sticks at IMS. It was great. It was really so much fun. May see them and never know. I mean, Carb Day, we haven't been able to have, but hopefully the Sticks and REO will come back into the mix for Carb Day. But Doug Bowles and I at the Speedway talk a lot about our love for these bands, and he's a Foreigner fan too. I mean, Foreigner was a Carb Day band. Journey was a Carb Day band. I love how they picked those classic rockers I think one year they didn't. those are bare naked ladies. And I'm like, I'm not, again, no, just think the bare naked lady, all the bare naked lady fans are going to hate me now. But keep it in the classic rock until we can't have these guys show up anymore because they're no longer here, which is another point I'd like to make. Can we please induct these rockers in before their time is up on planet Earth? And that happened with Yes. I mean, Yes, you know, just Yes, finally. Yes is one of the most like most important progressive rock bands ever. And they finally got inducted in you know, they're going to, hold on, I'm on low power mode. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, my screen dropped off. I know why my charger, hold on, let me, I don't know where I'm at, but yeah, it's still charging. We're at 8%. It's a good thing we're winding down. My iPad's at 8%. So yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that's super irritating to me and makes me really sad is that some of these guys are still alive. Some of them have passed away and their bandmates have had to accept for them because the ding dongs at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum have waited too long to induct them, or they may never get inducted. Okay, let's hurry up here before my iPad dies. That would be awful.
So my number 2 for you quickly is another individual artist. Again, plenty of deserving bands, but when I looked up the individual artists that are not in, it blew my mind. And he's in the Hall of Fame as a member of Genesis, inducted in 2010, but Phil Collins is not in the Hall of Fame.
I didn't know that. If I did, I forgot it as a solo artist.
And you can't tell me a more reaching artist.
Dude.
You know, just the Tarzan soundtrack alone, a legion of Disney fans. But
what about Face Value? Listen to Face Value, the album Face Value. Hello, I Must Be Going. I think that's the name of it.
He's got hit after hit after hit. And you talk about musical genius.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not just he's not a product. He wasn't just shoved up on stage to sing somebody else's songs. He is, you know, arranging the music. He's the drummer and the singer. I mean, I can't say enough great things about Phil Collins.
I'm a huge Phil Collins fan.
Amazing music.
Had no idea on the Phil Collins not in solo. I guess
but Peter Gabriel is. And not to take away from Peter Gabriel, he's in twice, Genesis and as an individual. I'm like, where's Phil Collins?
Somebody's doing shots over there and smoking something because they're not
Hipsterville.
And Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
Is it there, you know, she's in both. She's in there twice.
Okay. We're at number 1. And I don't want to rush you, but I don't want you to run.
I got 8%.
All right.
I'm still charging, so it's still plugged in. I'm so sorry.
Good.
Some stuff with Channel 13 today and utilized this iPad and been running around and doing errands and all that. So I apologize for the fear. I've got dogs at my feet too that want to make an appearance before we're done. That's really important, as you know. Number one.
What do you got?
This pisses me off that this band is not in. And I am here to tell you, they'll never get in. I don't know if it's because they're Canadian, but this band deserves to be in because of the longevity. Look, you have to, it has to be 25 years from the first album being released. This is doubled, okay? And then some. The Guess Who. Now, you may not know who the Guess Who is because you're a youngin'.
I'm very aware.
Okay. You know a little song called American Woman?
American Woman.
Well, you know who's going to get inducted before the Guess Who? And I love this guy because he's cutie patootie.
Lenny Kravitz.
Lenny Kravitz will get inducted before my band, Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings, who has the best voice next to Paul Rogers of Bad Company. Listen to me. The Guess Who is one of the best bands, one of the most, they have got so many amazing, No Sugar Tonight in my coffee, No Sugar Tonight in my tea. Oh my gosh, so many great songs. This band started in the late 60s. They went in through the 60s. They weren't really a long-standing band, but they really kind of came onto the scene and probably had a lot of influence on a lot of other rock bands. And then Randy Bachman ended up with his own band, Bachman Turner Overdrive, which in itself was a band that churned out hits, okay?
Loved them.
Randy Bachman, still to this day, and Burton Cummings, both still alive, both of the Guess Who, decided to go back out on the road together and play the hits of the Guess Who. Guess how many years ago? 2 years ago when the pandemic hit. We'll all be done. It never happened. I had tickets. I was ready to go see him in Cincinnati. Didn't
Oh, that
happen.
would have been amazing.
The Guess Who is just so just overlooked in general. Forget the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. Go listen to some of their hits from the late 60s and dipping into, I think American Woman came out in 70. Check that. You go, pretty sure that the American Woman came out in 70. But
It
I'll tell you,
was.
70. Here,
Mhm.
it's gonna happen. You watch that hottie, Lenny Kravitz. And when I say hottie, I mean hottie with all cap letters. He's hot. He's going to get inducted into the Rock Hall. And I guarantee you, in his acceptance speech, you know what he's going to say? Look, I really can't accept this without thanking my brothers from the Guess who actually wrote American Woman. And actually, American Woman, the story behind that, it was a fluke. The story behind American Woman, we're still at 8%, we're good. The story behind American Woman is that Randy Bachman, Burton Cummings, and the guys from the Guess Who in the 60s are from Canada. They're from Winnipeg. And they were performing at an ice rink or a curling rink. Because if you're a Canadian band, that's where you start your career, at a curling rink, right?
Absolutely.
Randy Bachman's guitar string broke right in the middle of their show. So he goes and he steps off stage, off to the side. He gets all fixed up. He comes back out and like is kind of looking at his bandmates going, okay, I got to get this warmed back up. And he went, dun, 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 dun. And in his head, he went, well, that sounded great. And then he went back. That wasn't a song then. This is before American Woman. But that's how American Woman came to be.
Oh man, I didn't know that.
Was from a broken guitar string at a curling rink in Winnipeg. And he went back and said, what was it I did to warm up the new string that I put on my guitar? And out came American Woman, which was a massive hit for the band. So many, She's Come Undone. I mean, there's just so many great rock songs. What a great rock band. The Guess Who. Toss in Bachman Turner Overdrive while you're at it. They won't make it in. They know it. Randy knows it. He says, I don't know if it's because we're Canadian. I mean, Rush is in the Rock Hall. There's another band that's Canadian that's overlooked. And
That's how I feel.
I know. Well, they were pretty bright guys. They were kind of pretty ahead of their time.
That's one where I get it. I understand the pick, but definitely not like Guess Who over Rush any day of the week. Absolutely.
Yeah. The Guess Who is just one that ticks me off really bad. And then I want to hear your number one, and then I have some honorary mentions. And I'm stepping away because I'm getting my vinyl, which is over here, and I want to show you. I think I got a Bad Company album to show you from legit my days of like putting the needle on the record as a teen. Okay, go ahead and tell me your number one. I swear I'm listening.
So I had Alice in Chains at 5, Dave Matthews Band at 4, then I had Ozzy, and then I had Phil Collins. My number one is also an artist, and this one I definitely understand, why. I don't know that I definitely understand. It's much more personal for me than it is for why. Like Phil Collins and Ozzy Osbourne, to me, I think it's a universal. Like, what? They're not in as individuals? That's nuts. This one is a more personal choice. I really can't believe he's not in. He is in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He was inducted in 1993.
I know who it is.
It's Jim Croce.
Oh,
Is my number one.
Really?
It's a personal choice. It's my dad's favorite artist of all time. He doesn't listen to a lot of music, but he listened to a lot of Jim Croce. So I have that personal connection to it. But the songs, if that whole era of sitting on a stool with an acoustic guitar, a cigarette, and just singing the songs, and Leroy Brown, Don't Mess Around with Jim, Car Wash Blues, Rapid Roy. You've got my personal favorite, my number one favorite song of all time is Walking Back to Georgia, which is a deeper cut for Jim Croce.
It is deep. I know it.
It's I've Got a Name, Carry It With Me Like My Daddy Did. I mean, it is Americana. And he died in 73 at the age of like 30. He was really young. So there's like that lore to it that I thought might help his case. I just don't understand it. Jim Croce should absolutely be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I kind of agree with you on that. I'm sorry that I kind of overlooked that, but my sister and I used to hang out in the basement and come out of like this. We had two like coffee tables that had swinging doors on them. And we would come busting out of them and say, bad, bad. Leroy Brown, baddest man in the whole damn town. And we thought that was so cool. We had a jukebox too, so we play it on the jukebox. And that's a good one. I respect you for that. That's a really, really good one. We have some really good ones in there. You got honorary mentions?
Um, I think we've already kind of covered them a little bit. Thin Lizzy. I think a lot of the metal acts, I should say. Thin Lizzy, Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. I mean, the real, and it's funny because Jim Croce is my number one, which is kind of softer, more singer songwriter. But they really overlook the metal and the grunge. So there's quite a few there. I will say this isn't necessarily a personal pick, but if you're talking about success and you're talking about reach, they get made fun of a lot, but they sell out everywhere they go and they've sold zillions of records. But Nickelback, their first album was in 96. And I know they're the butt of jokes, but but when they come on I've been out at the bar, somebody puts on Nickelback on the jukebox and people sing along. It's like
I know.
Again, that's more of
This is how you remind me. This is how
that's Nickelback.
you remind me. No on that one, but that's okay. I'm going to give you that.
That may be a more generational thing.
I think they just get dissed, and it's like
if you're talking about success, though, again, if you're going to put Bon Jovi in the Hall of Fame, if you're going to put these acts in the Hall of Fame based on, to me, they're just as in the mainstream, regardless of people making fun of them. Like, they're definitely not the worst band of all time. That's so stupid.
Ready for my honorary mentions?
I'm ready.
Can you believe that Peter Frampton isn't in?
Oh yeah, as an individual, that's nuts to me.
Joe Cocker's not in.
I thought he's not.
Wait a minute, Google it. I might be wrong. Just
You're probably really right with all the crap decisions they've made.
I'm going to show you a few of my albums while you look that up. So we talked about Bad Company, and this is the album that I recommend everybody. Here's my name on the back. I scribbled my name on the back of albums, but this is my Bad Company Desolation Angels album.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was just, I mean, look at Paul Rogers in his glasses. He was just a badass. I know we've got to shine, but this is Badco, Desolation Angels. And I really, is Joe Cocker in the Rock Hall?
He's not.
That's BS. Okay. Now, obviously Paul McCartney's in and the Beatles are in, but I just since we're talking about music and we're wrapping up here, I obviously had a crush on a guy named Nick. Look at my wings at the speed of sound. I scribbled a boy's name right there, like I heart Nick, and then my address is on here. This would be worth some serious money. This is my Paul McCartney Wings at the Speed of Sound. These are just a few. Okay, this was the first ever concert that I saw, Electric Light Orchestra. They're in it.
They are.
No, they're in it.
Thankfully, finally. But yeah, God, my favorite.
Jeff Lynne's brilliant. And then I've got this may be worth money, even though it's pretty torn up, at Toys in the Attic.
Toys in the Attic, yeah.
Can you stand it? I mean, this is like, I'm always afraid like a pot seed may fall out. I mean, I'm sure it was a sibling that did it, not me.
Absolutely.
The dogs would like to make an appearance here real quickly. And come here, guys. Let's get Pearl first. Let's get Pearl first. She's a fan of Janis Joplin because Janis Joplin's nickname was Pearl. So there's Pearl. So you got Pearl.
Hi there. Hey, Pearl.
And then we got, I don't know if I can pick up Oliver. Oh, yeah. He's just a bit bigger. He's a bit bigger. This is my dude, Ollie. That's the man.
Hey, buddy.
So, I'm so happy that you had me on, and we find out they're going to go fight because that's what they do. I know as soon as we're done, I'm going to think of a few bands that I forgot, and it's going to tick me off, and people are going to go, you left that out. But I feel really strongly about if you're talking about classic rock bands and you have a home for them and a shrine for them, and you're not putting them in, you're doing Foreigner, Boston, Bad Company, Pat Benatar, The Guess Who, Peter Frampton, some of your bands too, you're doing their fans and those bands, Styx and REO, a big disservice because we rocked to these bands for decades. I have literally, you saw my albums, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pissed.
Well, to your point, give them their flowers now. Why wait until they've passed? Like, let them and get them in where they can perform still. They're not just kind of decrepit and they can't even play anymore. Like, they just got the Doobie Brothers in what, like 2 years ago?
2 years ago, the Doobies, bravo on that. That
They
was
need
huge.
to get more in, because they're just that deserving, because that generation, that era of classic rock, I don't, what the years, or it's kind of a sliding scale, but if you want to do 70 to 80, or 69 to 82 or whatever, that is the best music that was ever made. And there's a reason rock radio and classic hits radio is still white hot today. There's an appetite for it, and it's the music that stood the test of time. So if you want to put in, again, when we look at the nominees, I hate to, denigrate other artists, but like a Beck or a Eurythmics, fine.
No,
I enjoyed them, but
yeah.
there are more deserving acts, and this is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
So then, as we wrap up, let me say to you on one of your picks, then Dave Matthews should sit this one out and let the other ones get in.
I would agree with that. I would agree.
That's where I feel like, let's go in order. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to the order. That's the other thing that makes me mad. I think I'm losing my battery, so we may have. Oh no, I'm at 7%. Pearl gets some more FaceTime. Yeah.
Oh, good, Pearl. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up then. I want to make sure people can follow you. I know you're the radio goddess across the Midwest, and you've been a lot of places. You've done a lot of cool things. So then you're one of the best people on social media to follow. You're always so positive and bright, and you just have this light about you. Where can people follow you? Where can they listen to you? Give us all the handles and all the places.
Okay. Starters in Indianapolis, I'm on 104.5 WJJK from 7 to midnight. And I do the 70s at 7 and the 80s at 8, and play a lot of the bands that aren't in the Rock Hall. And I may mention tonight on the air that I'm mad. So that's in Indy. I'm also on the air in Cincinnati on the Fox. And that's after Bob and Tom. And Cincy, it's a Bob and Tom affiliate, so I'm on after them. And that's pretty cool. I've been in Cincinnati radio for many years. That's 92.5, the Fox. They both have apps, so you can stream. It's pretty fun. I'm on there during the day. I'm on an Indy at night. Work at Channel 13 as well, which is awesome to be kind of at my ripe age and be in television. So I'm proud to be a part of the team at WTHR, doing some segments for them, some business segments. And on social media, I have a public page, Laura Steele, on Facebook. Just search out Laura Steele, public page. I am on Instagram at Laura Steele Media. And then I am on Twitter at Real Laura Steele. And it's because there's a fake one. And she's a Cher impersonator. It's weird. Don't ask. So yeah, right. Twitter, it's weird. That's a whole other chat. Real Laura Steele on Twitter, Laura Steele Media on Instagram, and just on Facebook, search out Laura Steele. And I adore you, and I know you fill in for me often on WJJK, and I'm really grateful for that. I know that the listeners are in good hands, and here's to hoping that maybe someone at the Rock Hall will watch this and wake up.
Yes.
Upside the head.
All right. Well, Laura, thank you so much, dear. I appreciate this, and I will obviously see you soon, and we'll do another episode, and you be well. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was so much fun to be on with you. Thank you.